Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk through to you some of the Zone 2 Fat Max close to LT1 type training I've been doing, and show you how that's like how I've kind of been inspired and influenced by the training that some riders on Team UAE Emirates have done. How what I've done is slightly different from that, and perhaps just a little bit of discussion around that. So, first of all, let's get on to screen share and we'll go through. Um, we'll go through what the some Strava files of Brandon McNulty and Pavel Sivakov, and we'll show you what they've been doing. So let's go to here. So it seems like the part of their training that I think is worth copying is these blocks they do that are really close to LT1. So I've seen some people making videos about this online, and they've referred to them as tempo efforts, whereas yeah, there's a big mistake to assume they're tempo efforts because they're really not. They're just, and the reason it's so effective and is that they're very close to LT1, as close as they can reasonably get. And they use lactate and um regular lactate testing and to make sure it is under their LT1, but only just so they're getting well. We'll explain why we think this is effective later. First of all, we'll just show you what they're doing exactly. So just have to search through their rides. So yeah, as we're going on, might as well say that the other thing that they do very differently from others in their training is all their other endurance riding is not much, still pretty close to LT1. Like look at that 270 watts. So this is not the type of ride that's their kind of like 270, 250 to 290 for these sort of guys, thresholds in the low to mid 400s. Seems to be the standard thing. So let's just try and find a day. I think do I remember this ride that he's got some blocks. So yeah, we've got some laps here. This is looking promising. So okay, yeah. So here we go. So look, it looks like at the start of the season they start with like 3 by 40, it's slightly lower power, and then progressing to 3 by an hour. And then they seem to progress to that quite quickly, and then they stay throughout the season at 3 by an hour. So a little bit of a warm up, and 3 by an hour with some easier riding in between. Where I think in these little blocks, I've often seen you see videos and photos of them taking lactates there to check that they're in the right zone at the end of these blocks. So you see, I mean that this three. It's actually not the best example because that is quite clearly this last block. Oh, what it looks like he's done is perhaps they're doing some kind of race simulation here because he's keeping under LT1 and then he's doing a block above, which brings him up to 360. So we'll find some other examples later, but the point is they tend to do 3 by an hour. Um, so if I go back, um, see if you that's that this is pretty embarrassing that that's the first example I find, which is kind of an outlier. Never seen any other rides that done like that. If we go back to December, because that um, let's do a ride which we think would be right. The ride tends to be about 4.5 hours when they do this. So good guess. Yes, here we go. Okay, there we go. So actually, because this looks either his LT1 is lower here on the other one, he was actually deliberately going slightly over. So that last example was pretty terrible. Um, so yeah, very close to LT1, but below it, and only an hour at a time. So, for example, I've looked at his max heart rate seems to be in about the like low 180s. So you can see actually his heart rate for these blocks, and that does it even tell you just on the summaries? Yeah, like 152, 146, 139. So this is very close to his LT1. And if I was actually coaching him, I'd be saying this seems too high. You know, maybe. But yeah, point is, I think if there's anything in the stimulus of what they're doing, like I don't think this all endurance rides at like 250 to 280 is necessary or optimal, but I think what does work, maybe some of that, but and even when you hear some of the coaches talking, they seem to think that this session basically here is really key. These block, like two sessions of these maybe a week, so like 3 hours of time really close to LT1. Um, but then they don't seem to do it on their, they don't do it every ride, but they just do one, two rides a week where they're doing that. Um, so if we look back to earlier in his, in his build, we'll just kind of show you what that progression looks like. So if you think that last one was 3 times an hour at 310, um, and then we go to like earlier when he's building back up, something like this. Let's hope this is the right one. We guessed well. Yeah, so look, perfect. Early in the season, 3 by 40. So if you're going to do this for your first time, this might be something I send my clients for the first time, 3 by 40, right close to LT1. So a lot of people think, people who like FTPs in the mid-low 300s, they look at this, and as soon as people see 300 watts, they think tempo. But you got to remember, for someone who's really well trained, LT1's really close to second threshold, and the threshold's a lot higher. 300 watts is below LT1. It's actually quite a comfortable, sustainable pace. So even though the absolute power here is really high, that's not that hard for these guys. So now, like I say, they tend to do this just only in these rides. They do them like once, twice a week. And then the rest of their endurance riding is like quite hard. Like I say, it's like 270, like just 260 to 290 even. So what I've kind of been doing is I've not been doing that 260, 290 stuff, but I have been throwing in these blocks of like really close to LT1. And I've generally done, like, I've thrown in shorter blocks. I've kind of been progressively like leaned into it more. Um, so quite often I've done stuff like, so quite often I use it for activation. For example, I just throw in like one. So my max heart rate's like probably now like mid 190s. So like just an activation, just that was sort of like a 21 minute block at 330. That was just straight after an easy week. Um, or let's have a look, some other more typical examples. So like this one here. Um, so yeah, like easier riding. This was like 236, and then yeah, 25-minute block 330, 22-minute block 325, 320. So not like loads, but then I actually did this like many, throwing in blocks like this multiple days per week. So that's just like got another little block here at the end of a ride there. So that half an hour at 320. Um, which is the day before. Um, so yeah, like so just picking up his tempo, because of course none of all these things don't realize how high your LT1 can be relative to your second threshold. Um, and like, oh, this one here. Um, so yeah, basically just been kind of throwing it in every now and then, just kind of so this is about the one time I actually did some, yeah, another block there, like little block at 300. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And only once have I done, well, the one time when I've really leaned into it, doing like as I said, like on the last video, a full dose of it, rather than splitting it up into 3 times 1 hour. I just did one long block at 319. So you can see their heart rates 148. So that's comfortably under my LT1 heart rate, even though it was after rest days, quite fresh. Um, and yeah, I just thought, I can't take lactate, and just thought, yeah, I didn't really see the reason to take those little breaks. In future, I might try that and see how the fatigue is different. But honestly, the fatigue from this wasn't even that bad. Um, and I would quite happily, and it would just quite tempting to just keep that going for 4 hours. I did need a piss there, though, as you can see. Um, And also I thought like UAE seemed to do 3 by an hour. I've seen Sivkov do 3 by, 2 by an hour, 1 by 90 before. So I thought, okay, 3 by 15 can't be that, 3.25 hours can't be that bad. Um, and then I just did a little bit more like UAE type normal endurance riding here, like 290 for the last 50. And then I did the last 50 then at like 220 something, and the average was still 295 watts for 5 hours. So um, yeah. So what it two thoughts is like I've compared to previous years, um, my fitness is going a lot better, is improving a lot faster than ever before. And one of the few major changes I've made is including more of that time. But equally, I've not gone anywhere near as extreme as UAE have. And like I seem to be able to do this. My LT1 seems to be as close to my second threshold as anyone in UAE does. So yeah, my question is, does that mean I lean into it more and be even more extreme, or does that mean that what I'm doing is just right, or does it mean that it's not even really necessary at all, and I could kind of go back to my usual approach of being even more minimum effective dose of this and mostly doing like longer, even easier rides? Um, I don't know, and I'll keep on experimenting. I definitely enjoy this work, and I could see this particular session being something really good to do, like in race season, where I have a hard race at the weekend, and then maybe a stage race. Then midweek, I might not do any high intensity. I might just do a ride like this. Um, so let's go off the screen share a minute. So why do I think that it's so effective, particularly with people higher LT1s? Um, so if you think so a muscle fiber is either on or it's off. It's either contracting or it's not. So if I pick up something light like my Garmin, I'm not using many motor units in my bicep because they're not required. If I want to pick up something, a book and my Garmin, then I'm going to have to use slightly more motor units. So as a cyclist, I won't have great capillary density in my arms or my fingers because they're not endurance trained, but I will in my quadriceps and my glutes and my hamstrings. So it's quite clear that whatever muscles you're not using, these peripheral adaptations aren't whole body. They're specific to the muscles that are being used. So now back to the cycling. If I did all the same amount of kilojoules by riding 100 watts, but I was doing like 70-hour weeks at 100 watts, then I'm not using, I'm only using the motor units required to ride at 100 watts. So back to, do I have adaptations to my peripheral adaptation, aerobic adaptations to my arms? No, because I don't use my arms to pedal. So am I going to get peripheral adaptations in all the muscles I want in my legs if I do all my endurance riding at 100, 120 watts, or by extension 200 versus 300 watts? I think maybe not. Um, the other factor to this is that then when the duration of the ride extends from 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 hours, by the time you're doing that eighth hour of the ride, you actually it does appear that the motor unit recruitment actually changes. So maybe, if you that's why they're so effective, because if you do go that long, um, you are actually getting into like eventually getting into all the bigger type 1 motor units. So it's a good distinction to make. We don't want to really be getting into type 2s here. It's just about maximizing the amount of type 1 motor unit recruitment, mostly, from what I'd estimate and understand. Um, so yeah, that's why I think it's effective is, and from all the other like mechanisms of adaptation, um, they're like, and like a lot of the central adaptations you get from endurance riding when you're less well trained. That's why I say if you're less well trained, perhaps is you just focus on getting more volume and making those kilojoules is like is minimizing the neuromuscular fatigue of them so you can just do more volume. As you start to become less well trained, I think perhaps the like really easy cruising is not really going to do anything for your central adaptations, and you just want the peripheral adaptations. And you need to start getting them more spread out across all the type 1 motor units. So then leaning more into the endurance riding a bit close to LT1, perhaps that is why it's more effective for increasing your LT1 at least, and possibly then even, increasing your threshold, because you think you're using, like, if you low 300 watts, it's using more of the motor units that are responsible for riding, mid 400s onwards. So perhaps that's why.